When I told my parents, my mother's first words weren't, "We'll help," or "We love you." The first thing out of her mouth was, "Well, we can't derail your brother's plans for his master's degree. This is just terrible timing." My father just nodded along. They actually laughed when I started to cry. That was the moment I knew. My life was less important than my brother's future. This is the story of how I survived not just a dying organ, but the family that was perfectly willing to let it kill me. To really get how my parents could laugh at my death sentence, you have to understand their world. In their little world, there were only two roles assigned at birth. My brother, Mark, was the golden child. And I was the ghost. Mark was their mirror, he was the one they saw all their own hopes and dreams in. He was into business like my father, he had my mother's outgoing personality. Their bond wasn't just close, it was a fortress, and I was on the outside looking in. My whole childhood was just a slow, quiet chipping away at my self-worth. I remember winning a state-level award for a science project in high school. I was so proud, I practically floated home. When I showed them the certificate, my mother just glanced at it and said, "That's nice, dear," before immediately turning to Mark to ask about his soccer practice. My father was already busy helping him with his future CEO homework. The award was never mentioned again. It just vanished into thin air. Meanwhile, Mark could do no wrong. He crashed his first car? Boys will be boys, that's how he'll learn. He failed a college class? That professor clearly had it out for him, we'll get him a tutor. They poured every dollar, every ounce of emotional energy into sculpting his perfect future. I was just expected to be self-sufficient. Don't cause problems, don't have needs, and whatever you do, don't take any attention away from Mark. I learned how to be invisible because being seen meant you were a distraction from the main event. I didn't get it back then. They weren't just neglecting me, they were practicing. They were training me to accept that my needs would always come second. This pattern of emotional distance was what set the stage for the ultimate betrayal. The diagnosis hit me like a ton of bricks. End-stage chronic kidney disease. All those years of subtle symptoms I'd brushed off, being tired all the time, the swelling, it had all led to total organ failure. The doctor was kind, but he didn't sugarcoat it. "We need to get you on the transplant list. Now. Your immediate family should get tested first. It's your best shot." I drove to my parents' house in a total fog. Some small, naive part of me thought this would be the thing. This would be the crisis that finally made them see me. A life or death situation has to change things, right? I sat them down in the living room, the same room where all of Mark's trophies gleamed on the mantel. I told them everything. The diagnosis, the timeline, the urgent need for a donor. And then I asked, Would you both get tested? And maybe ask Mark to get tested?" Silence. My dad looked at my mom. My mom looked at the floor. Then, she let out this small, sharp sound. A huff. A laugh. It was the sound of complete disbelief, like I'd just told the most ridiculous joke she'd ever heard. "Well," she said, finally meeting my eyes, which were ice cold. "We can't just derail your brother's plans for his master's degree. He's in the middle of his most important semester. The stress alone could ruin his grades." My father, right on cue, nodded. "She's right. Mark needs to focus. And surgery, that's a big ask. We have his future to think about." Tears just started pouring down my face. I couldn't stop them. It was this raw, wounded sob. And that's when they both laughed. Not a cruel laugh, but something so much worse, a dismissive, patronizing laugh. It was the laugh of people who just can't be bothered by your trivial, life-ending emergency. "Oh, don't be so dramatic," my mother said, waving her hand. "You'll get on a list. Someone will come up. But your brother's future is happening right now. I just stared at them. The golden child's master's degree versus my life. It wasn't even a debate. I wasn't their daughter in that moment. I was a logistical problem. An inconvenient scheduling conflict. I walked out of that house and didn't look back. I knew right then I wasn't just fighting a disease. I was completely, utterly alone. The next few months were the darkest of my entire life. My body was failing me, and the emotional wreckage from my family felt like a whole separate disease. I started dialysis. 3 times a week, for hours at a time, I'd sit in a cold clinic while a machine did the work my kidneys couldn't. It left me constantly exhausted, sick to my stomach, and just weak. My world shrank down to my apartment and the dialysis center. Friends would call, but I got tired of trying to explain why my own family wouldn't even get a simple test. The shame was suffocating. How do you tell people your parents literally decided your brother's GPA was more important than your heartbeat? It felt like admitting I really was worthless. That they were right about me all along. I fell into a deep depression, a hopelessness that was just as toxic as the poison building up in my blood. My parents never called. Not one time. I heard later from a cousin that my mother told everyone I was handling it and that they didn't want to intrude. Mark sent me a single text, "Heard you're sick. Bummer. Super swamped with school. TTYL. Later never came. Every time my phone rang with an unknown number, my heart would just leap, praying it was the transplant coordinator. Every single time, it was a telemarketer. I was just a name on the deceased donor list, one of thousands, waiting for a stranger's tragedy to save my life. Hope was running out. I was at rock bottom, tethered to a machine, with the sound of my parents laughing on a constant loop in my head. Just when I truly thought I had nothing left, a little bit of light came from the last place I ever expected. My Aunt Carol, my mom's estranged sister, called me. She'd heard what was going on through the family gossip mill and was horrified. "I cannot believe them," she said, her voice crackling with an anger that felt so validating it was like being wrapped in a warm blanket. "I'm flying out next week. And I'm getting tested." I tried to tell her no, that she didn't have to do that, but she just cut me off. "Family is supposed to show up," she said, and those 4 words started to heal a part of me I thought was dead. Aunt Carol arrived like a hurricane of fierce love and no-nonsense support. She cleaned my apartment, cooked meals for me, and sat with me during dialysis, holding my hand. And she got tested. A week later, we got the call. She was a perfect match. The relief was so overwhelming it actually hurt. I cried for a solid hour. Not just because I had a future, but because someone had seen me. Someone had chosen me. The surgery was scheduled, and Aunt Carol became my rock, my champion, my real family. My parents were notified as a formality since they were my next of kin. They sent a cheap flower arrangement from the hospital gift shop. The card just said, "Wishing you a speedy recovery." No call. No visit. Waking up after the transplant was like being born again. The toxic fog in my brain cleared. The color came back to my face. But the biggest change was inside me. I was free. Free from the disease, sure, but also free from that desperate, childish need for my parents' approval. Their betrayal almost killed me, but Aunt Carol's love saved me. I had found my family. It wasn't the one I was born into, but the one I was chosen by. 2 years went by. With my new kidney, I built a new life. I finished my degree, landed a great job in a new city, and made a beautiful life for myself, with Aunt Carol at the center of it. I'd had 0 contact with my parents or Mark. I blocked their numbers and cut them out of my life completely. Now, they were the ghosts. Then, of course, the phone call came. An unknown number. I almost declined it, but something made me answer. It was my mother, and her voice was pure panic. "We need your help," she said. No hello, no how are you, no apology. It's Mark. Of course it was Mark. The golden child had finally lost his shine. After all their investment, he'd flunked out of his master's program, gotten himself into a mountain of debt, and was now being evicted. He needs a place to stay, just for a little while, my mother begged. And some money to get back on his feet. We spent all our savings on his tuition, we don't have anything left. I just listened, perfectly calm. The old me would have been a tangled mess of guilt and anger. But the new me? I felt nothing but a quiet, solid resolve. No, I said. The line went dead silent. What do you mean, no, my mother finally stammered. I mean no, I repeated, my voice steady. My resources are for my family. And you made it perfectly clear 2 years ago that I am not yours. And you are not mine. But he's your brother, she shrieked. You can't just abandon him. And then I finally said the words I'd been waiting 2 years to say. Actually, I can. You taught me how. You gave me the most important lesson of my life. When someone's future is on the line, you have to be practical. You can't let feelings get in the way. It's just really terrible timing for me to help right now. I need to focus on my own future. The silence on the other end was deafening. I could hear my father sputtering something in the background. But I wasn't done. You once laughed when I was dying, I said, my voice never shaking. So please understand why I'm not crying over a failed master's degree. Goodbye. I hung up the phone. And for the first time in years, I laughed. It wasn't a cruel laugh. It wasn't for revenge. It was the laugh of freedom. The scales were finally balanced. Have you ever had to choose between your family and your own survival? It's a horrible choice to have to make, but sometimes it's the only thing that can save you. Tell me your story in the comments. And if my story hit home for you, don't forget to subscribe for more. My story doesn't have a nice, tidy ending where my family sees the error of their ways and we all hug it out. That stuff is a fantasy. My reality is so much better. I have peace. I have my health. And I have a small but fierce chosen family that loves me without conditions. It took me nearly dying to learn that your worth isn't decided by the family you're born into. It's decided by you. You get to decide who deserves a place in your life. You get to decide who is worth your energy. And you learn how to be the one to save yourself, especially from the people who were supposed to do it first. The best vindication isn't getting even, it's building a life so full and happy that their absence feels like a gift.